Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Stephanie Cox. The U.S. Supreme Court upholds a lower court's ruling rejecting a lawsuit brought against the FDA over its emergency vaccine authorization for children. The first presidential debate is happening this Thursday. President Biden and former President Trump are preparing for their rematch. We look at what they were up to over the weekend. 20 are dead after shootings in Russia. Gunmen coordinated the attacks on churches and synagogues. 22 people are dead after a large explosion at a South Korean lithium battery factory. Nearby restaurant workers describe the blast. This year's Trafficking in Persons report is out. Here, the current state of human trafficking around the globe. At least 47 in China's Guangdong province have died from flooding. We zoom into one tragedy where a woman says her relative died after authorities discharged water from a reservoir. A delightful story about one man, the American dream, and a new offering in upstate New York. Delectable footage from his French-inspired bakery. "22 people have been confirmed dead after a large explosion ignited a fire at a lithium battery factory in South Korea. Today's blaze started after a series of battery cells exploded inside a warehouse with some 35,000 units. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the latest on the catastrophe.
What triggered the explosion at the South Korean battery plant remains unclear. Fire officials said a total of 102 people were working at the factory when the fire broke out. Nearby restaurant workers described the blast.
"I thought there were gunshots and shells falling because of the war. It was so loud, it kept rumbling and banging."
Parts of the factory's upper level had collapsed, and large chunks of the building had been blown out into the street. Earlier, smoke drifted across the city skyline. 18 Chinese workers, 2 South Koreans, and 1 Laotian were among the dead.
"I feel really bad. The victims used to come here every day, but they didn't come today. I don't have an appetite anymore, and I don't feel like eating anything for dinner because I feel very sad for them."
Rechargeable lithium-ion batteries are commonplace in consumer goods like laptops and cell phones, but they can overheat if damaged, defective, or improperly packaged. Resulting fires and explosions make them a shipping hazard, especially aboard aircraft. South Korea is a major industrial economy and has made efforts to improve its safety record after several past accidents. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
And another tragedy, 20 confirmed dead today after a series of attacks on churches and synagogues in Russia. Gunmen launched coordinated attacks in 2 of the country's most important cities.
Attackers with automatic weapons burst into an Orthodox church and a synagogue in the ancient city of Derbent on Sunday evening. They set fire to an icon at the church and killed 66-year-old Orthodox priest Nikolai Kotelnikov. In the Caspian city of Makhachkala, around 75 miles north, attackers shot at a traffic police post and attacked a church. Gun battles erupted around the Assumption Cathedral in Makhachkala, with heavy automatic gunfire ringing out late into the night. At least 5 of the attackers were killed, and Russia's investigative committee said the majority of those dead were policemen. Dagestan is made up of a patchwork of ethnic groups, languages and regions that live in the shadow of the Caucasus Mountains between the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea. President Vladimir Putin, who has long accused the West of trying to stoke separatism in the area, expressed condolences to those who lost relatives via his spokesman, Dmitry Peskov. The attack on Christian and Jewish places of worship has stoked fears Russia may be facing a renewed militant Islamist threat just 3 months after a deadly attack in Moscow. 145 people were killed at the Crocus Concert Hall in March. Islamic State claimed responsibility for that attack.
And next, with the presidential debates quickly approaching, both President Biden and former President Trump are preparing for this Thursday's debate rematch. NTD's Jeremy Sandberg has more on the lead-up.
President Biden and his team spent the weekend at Camp David for briefings and mock debates. Biden's running mate will be Vice President Kamala Harris again. A Biden campaign memo on Sunday said the president plans to focus on abortion, democracy, and Trump's economic plans during Thursday's debate. Trump called for Christians to vote at a Faith and Freedom Coalition conference in Washington, D.C. on Saturday. He also rallied at Temple University in Philadelphia and told voters if he wins Pennsylvania, he will win the presidency. He spoke about inflation, crime, and the possibility of World War III.
The Middle East is exploding. Iran is emboldened. China is on the march.
The presumptive GOP nominee vowed to seal the border to stop illegal immigration on day one if he wins.
And on day one, we will begin the largest domestic deportation operation in American history. We have no choice.
Trump said on Saturday he has a running mate in mind, but hasn't told them yet.
No, nobody knows.
That's right. Tim Scott, your way, baby. Win.
Who do you like as VP?
I like you to run the whole country.
Trump's recently listed candidates include Senators Tim Scott, Marco Rubio, and J.D. Vance, along with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, and Dr. Ben Carson. Governor Burgum told CNN Sunday Biden can step up when he needs to on the debate stage.
This guy has got the ability, and we've seen it. We've seen him in debate 4 years ago. We've seen him in the State of the Union this year.
Burgum says he thinks Trump will win regardless of who his pick for vice president is. Trump has indicated he'll announce his running mate during the Republican National Convention, where he's set to be formally nominated. The convention will be July 15th, just 4 days after Trump's sentencing in his New York criminal case. Possible penalties include a fine, house arrest, probation, or imprisonment. Biden and Trump are expected to debate a second time at an ABC News hosted debate on September 10th. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
Here on NTD, Steve Lance and Tiffany Meyer will be presenting an exciting and well-rounded analysis of the first presidential debate. Watch the first half of our coverage on The Nation Decides at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time this Thursday, June 27th. And stay tuned for the live CNN presidential debate on CNN or simulcast on NTD News at 9 p.m. Eastern. We'll jump back on with the second half of our show right after the debate. Don't miss it. And next, the Supreme Court is jumping into the fight over transgender issues. Today, the court agreed to hear an appeal from the Biden administration, which is seeking to block states from banning cross-sex procedures and drugs for minors. The case before the High Court involves a law in Tennessee that restricts puberty blockers and hormone therapy for minors. A federal appeals court allowed the law to take effect after lower courts had blocked it. Lawmakers supporting the restrictions have said the drugs are experimental and potentially harmful. Those challenging the law argue that the ban violates the 14th Amendment's guarantees of equal protection and due process. Last week, South Carolina became the 25th state to adopt a law restricting or banning transgender medical procedures for minors. Oral arguments will take place in the fall. And more in the Supreme Court news. The High Court rejected 2 COVID vaccine-related appeals from Children's Health Defense today. Children's Health Defense was founded by independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's been critical of the COVID vaccines testing and rollout. One appeal challenged the FDA's emergency authorization of the vaccine. The group argued that COVID vaccines were ineffective and lacked proper vetting. But an appeals court determined that Kennedy's group lacked legal standing to sue. And the other appeal challenged the vaccine mandate by New Jersey Rutgers University. The appeals court determined that the plaintiffs, quote, did not present any plausible claim for relief. In controversy over a new bill in California, supporters say it's protecting students with gender confusion. Critics say it's undermining parents' rights. NTD's Daniel Monahan speaks with an attorney for analysis.
AB 1955 is authored by Assemblymember Christopher Ward and State Senator Scott Wiener. It forces the State Department of Education to create or update resources for LGBT students and their families. It also makes it illegal for teachers or staff to reveal a student's sexual orientation or gender identity to parents without the student's permission. In addition, it would prohibit retaliation against teachers and staff for whatever work activities they do to support LGBT students. Attorney Nicole Pearson says the bill is trying to drive a wedge between parents and their kids.
What this law will do, what this bill, will do if it becomes law, is make it legal not only for those teachers to have private, inappropriate conversations with your child that you are not privy to, but then lie to you about what discussions they have. So it's a very dangerous bill.
Pearson says she and other attorneys have made formal Freedom of Information requests to Attorney General Rob Bonta and Governor Gavin Newsom. They're asking for data to show how many parents would reject or potentially abuse their child if they came out as gender confused.
We have never received that data. In fact, the data does not support that. We live in a country where everyone is presumed innocent, even criminals, until proven guilty. And so we have to operate from actually the presumption, number one, that all the parents are well-intentioned parents. We're not perfect parents, but we always want what's best in the best interest of our children.
The attorney says the courts have always strived to keep families together, and that even the bill acknowledges that kids thrive when parents are involved in their lives.
We're talking about parents who are drug addicts, parents who are sex workers, parents who abuse their children, send them to the hospital, who lose custody. We're always working towards reunification. So why here in this instance, with zero data and support, are we assuming or presuming these parents are going to be abusive and allowing the state to step in the middle of that relationship and to take over where parents are actually critically important to be involved?
Assembly Bill 1955 will be voted on this week in the Assembly Education Committee in Sacramento. NTD reached out to bill author Senator Scott Wiener and Assembly member Christopher Ward. We're still waiting to hear back from them. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Authoritarian regimes like China, North Korea, and Iran have among the worst human trafficking records. That's according to Washington's newly released 2024 Trafficking in Persons report. NTD's Jack Bradley joins us from the State Department. Jack, what are the key findings in this report?
Good afternoon, Steph. Well, we know that there are 3 tiers in this report. Tier 1 has had the best track record of human rights and human trafficking, including the U.S., though it is prevalent, UK, think countries like that. Tier 2 included those countries where it was more prevalent, but they were working to cure it. And Tier 3 included countries with mostly authoritarian regimes like China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, but they did include those that they weren't even working toward solving that, according to the State Department. These countries, among those Tier 3 ones, were said to have policy or patterns of human trafficking that were state-sanctioned. Take a look at some of that.
This year, the Secretary determined 13 countries exhibited a policy or pattern of trafficking. Belarus rejoined this list, and Sudan was newly added to the list, while several other governments, including Cuba, the PRC, and Russia, remained on the list from previous years. The 2024 TIP report also documented several emerging global trends. For example, forced labor in online scam operations continued to grow, with scam centers previously located mostly in Southeast Asia, emerging also in South America, Europe, South Asia, the Middle East, and Africa.
So we see in this report it highlights sex labor, forced labor, and even trafficking of persons for forced organ harvesting. One of the countries of note is China, where the report noted several instances in cases of reports that included forced organ harvesting of prisoners of conscience, including practitioners of Falun Gong, as well as Muslim Uyghurs and others. China uses its human trafficking in the Belt and Road Initiative as well, which includes building infrastructure projects in third world countries to gain military and economic dominance over there. And we can see that the human trafficking element is quite prevalent in there as well. The report also noted the growing role of technology, both used to gain victims and as well as put an end by law enforcement to the human trafficking. Perpetrators use social media and other online platforms to victimize some people, but the technology, including AI, can be used to catch those perpetrators. Steph, back to you.
Thank you so much, Jack Bradley, for that important report. Okay, beware falling objects. Over in southwest China, online footage shows what appears to be a rocket booster crashing into a wooded village, releasing plumes of yellow smoke into the air. In a separate video, large pieces of debris could be seen scattered near a resident's home. Some speculate the components came from a Chinese satellite known as the Long March 2C. The spacecraft was launched into orbit from Sichuan province at 3 p.m. Saturday. This isn't the first time a Chinese rocket took an uncontrolled plunge back into the Earth's atmosphere. U.S. officials have long criticized the communist regime over its handling of spent rocket debris. And next, southern China reeling from massive flooding. At least 47 people in Guangdong province died from floodwaters. The death toll from other affected regions unclear so far. One resident says she lost her mother-in-law to man-made flash flooding. Watch.
Floodwaters continue to batter southern China after claiming the lives of 47 people in Guangdong. A local resident told NTD that floodwaters submerged several floors of buildings. We have distorted his voice to protect his identity.
Many buildings have been damaged. People can't live there anymore.
In Hunan province, floodwaters have submerged train stations. One local resident was seen kayaking on the river, while another appeared to try to walk in the water by sticking stools to the bottom of his feet. But he fell into the water after losing balance. In Anhui province, residents watch houses collapse and fall into muddy floodwaters. Murky waters carried cars downstream. In coastal Fujian province, a resident surnamed Han suggested authorities are to blame for her mother-in-law's death. With torrential rain battering the region, authorities opened a water reservoir upstream to discharge floodwaters, causing a flash flood. The current submerged her in-law's house, burying her mother-in-law inside. Flash floods can submerge houses quickly. Here, a clip shows a house being submerged following discharge from a local reservoir. Han told Chinese media that she could imagine how helpless her mother-in-law was the moment she was buried. She said, quote, her body was still in the posture of trying to survive after it was dug out. She was hit on her head. Authorities said they notified residents before discharging floodwaters, though some villagers say they didn't get the notification to evacuate.
Days of heavy rains have led to severe flooding in central states. The governors of 2 states have declared emergencies after one person died, and entire communities are being evacuated due to the rising waters. According to an emergency services manager, a rail bridge connecting North Sioux City, South Dakota, with Sioux City, Iowa, collapsed into the Big Sioux River Sunday night. No one was hurt in the incident. Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds has declared a disaster for parts of the state impacted by the flooding, including calling up the National Guard. In South Dakota, where one person has died, Governor Kristi Noem declared an emergency after severe flooding in the southeastern part of her state. The National Weather Service says parts of Nebraska, South Dakota, Minnesota, and Iowa received 8 times more rain than normal, with more rain in the forecast. And when we come back 2 weeks before the NATO summit in Washington, D.C., several European defense ministers meeting in Paris today. What pressing issues they're discussing. And iPhone maker Apple is about to be hit with a major fine by EU antitrust regulators. We'll tell you why after the break. And a delectable tour of a pastry chef's dream come true in upstate New York. His inspirational story. That and more to come.
The Kindness is Cool Video Awards are back for their 2nd year. Record and nominate acts of kindness, both big and small, from individuals, families, and communities. Submit your videos on ganjingworld.com with the hashtag KindnessIsCool. Win a $10,000 grand prize and be featured on a New York Times Square billboard. Visit ganjingworld.com and start sharing today. Kindness is cool.
I'm Ilka. I live with my daughter and with my grandchildren. There's a sense of comfort that comes with eating a good meal. We try to make the most, of what we have. We have rent to pay, and then there are lights and there are gas. And while my daughter and I both work, it still just doesn't seem like there's enough to go around sometimes.
Every day, millions of our neighbors face hunger, including 1 in 5 children, and food costs keep rising. Please call or go online right now to join Feeding America with your gift of just $19 a month, only 63 cents a day. Your monthly support can fill plates with nutritious food for families across the country and in your community, thanks to a nationwide network of food banks and volunteers.
If you were over and playing with us, you were part of our family and you were going to eat. A real cook can take nothing and make something.
No one should ever have to wonder if they will have enough to eat, and our neighbors are working hard to feed their families every day. Call or go online now. Visit helpfeedingamerica.org and give $19 a month. 98% of donations go directly to help millions of people facing hunger from coast to coast and in your own community. Use your credit card and you'll get this exclusive canvas grocery bag as a thank you for joining hands with people across America to help end hunger.
Some of the lessons that I hope that my family will take, it is important to treat people the way that you want to be treated. I have carried on the tradition of loving people through food.
Please call right now or go online to make a monthly gift at helpfeedingamerica.org. Your support helps our neighbors bring food home to their families.
There's always a searching process for beauty. You know it when you see it.
Welcome back. NATO might be going through some of its most difficult times. The alliance needs to address threats coming from Russia and China. It also needs to secure its member states' financial commitment. Several European defense ministers met in Paris today to discuss these issues. NTD's international correspondent David Vives has the details.
On Monday, the defense ministers of France, Germany and Poland met in Paris 2 weeks ahead of the NATO summit in Washington, D.C. Discussion topics included global and European security issues and a joint military exercise in 2025 on Polish territory. The defense ministers collectively vowed continued assistance to Ukraine. They also urged NATO members to meet the 2% defense expenditure target. This follows the nomination of NATO's new Secretary General, Mark Rutte, on Thursday, June 20th. According to think tank security president Emmanuel Dupuy, there are many challenges for the alliance.
NATO isn't just an alliance for collective security anymore. It is increasingly becoming an alliance for the defense of European territory against Russian aggression. And from this point of view, the first challenge for the future NATO chief will be to convince all NATO members of his ability to adopt this perspective.
Dupuy says the NATO leader will have to convince its member states in Europe to upscale their commitment in the conflict in Ukraine to avoid defeat.
He also needs to convince European countries to make a real, full and complete commitment to a war economy, which can only work if all the countries concerned do so with the same degree of commitment.
Another point mentioned during the defense ministers' meeting in Paris is the framework for the use of nuclear weapons in Europe. NATO needs to rule on this as well. The issue was mentioned by Macron earlier this year, as he proposed to share France's nuclear deterrence with European countries.
The idea that the strategic interests of the European Union and the strategic interests of France are one and the same, or at least converge, reopens the question of the place of nuclear power in the European space.
The NATO summit will be held from July 9th to 11th in Washington, D.C. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
And European Union antitrust regulators are looking to take a bite out of Apple, hitting the iPhone maker with a hefty fine. NTD's Don Ma has that story and more in today's Business Matters.
Okay, thank you, Steph. European Union antitrust regulators today charged Apple for breaching the bloc's tech rules. And this is a charge that could result in a hefty fine for the iPhone maker, which, by the way, also faces another investigation into new fees imposed on app developers. So the European Union said it had sent its preliminary findings to Apple following an investigation launched in March. And the charge against Apple is the first by the Commission under its landmark Digital Markets Act, or DMA, which seeks to rein in the power of big tech and ensure a level playing field for smaller rivals. It has until March next year to issue a final decision. DMA violations could result in a fine of as much as 10% of a company's global annual turnover. Apple said it had made a number of changes in the past several months to comply with the DMA after getting feedback from app developers and the Commission. Meanwhile, today's planned spacewalk is a no-go. NASA officials called off the spacewalk because of a water leak in the cooling unit inside of one of the astronauts' spacesuits. And this happened just as they were transitioning to battery power right before they were to exit the International Space Station to do some maintenance. The 6.5-hour spacewalk was intended to remove a faulty electronics box from a communications antenna. NASA says the crew was not in danger at any point. All right, that's all from me, Steph. Back to you.
Thank you, Don. Next, a delectable dream come true. A French-trained Indian baker brings new offerings to Middletown, New York. Check out his grand opening over the weekend, which was such a success, the store sold out before it closed for the day.
3, 2, 1.
Meet Rakesh Nayak. He just opened his own bakery in downtown Middletown, a city about 70 miles north of Manhattan. Born in India, he attended one of the best pastry schools in France. He worked his way up through the ranks from working for cruises and hotels to becoming the head pastry chef for Cipriani restaurants nationwide.
This is the American dream you're looking at in Rakesh. Came here from India with nothing, and now look what he's brought here in the heart of the city of Middletown as a new business owner. This is pretty special.
The foundation of Mr. Nayak's business is a set of principles he uses to guide the shop.
We are looking forward to express this Mr. Croissant towards our community. We believe in following the truthfulness, compassionate, and tolerance, using this truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance, and being involved with the community and spreading this beautiful principle we believe in to all our neighbors.
The opening of Mr. Croissant represents the fruits of a government and private sector partnership.
We've had a huge investment into our downtown community. We've made a huge public investment in infrastructure. Doing all those things attracts private investment.
The name of the bakery has its own origin story.
So customers started calling me Mr. Croissant. And one day, when we were opening this location, me and my wife were sitting and brainstorming the name. And my wife said, why not Mr. Croissant? And that's how we came up with Mr. Croissant Bakery and Cafe.
While the store just opened, customers are already giving it rave reviews.
Excellent. The best I ever had.
Mr. Nayak hopes to create a franchise in the future. The store offers croissants, cakes, and coffee to customers. He uses traditional techniques and top quality ingredients at his store. For example, he uses ingredients imported from Italy and butter from France for his signature croissants.
Thank you for watching NTD Newsroom. I'm Stephanie Cox. Join Tiffany Meyer for the NTD Evening News at 6 p.m. Eastern.